Sorry, Infantino, the World Cup is not for sale. Meanwhile, Eddie Howe suddenly quits Newcastle, Arbeloa's Fulham raid Real Madrid as Los Blancos sign another striker, and Maxence Lacroix joins, quote, the best club in the world? This is DMAC Daily. The spectacular downfall of Gianni Infantino is taking place at rapid speed. Football's biggest cancer has taken a fundamental misstep in attempting to sell off the World Cup to private investment to make himself millions, and is now facing the most satisfying of backlashes. For years, Infantino had successfully pushed through some of the most controversial reforms: the expanded Club World Cup, the expanded 48-team World Cup, that all featured increasingly aggressive Americanized elements, commercialization on overdrive. But this time, his greed simply went too far. His sneaky proposal to sell stakes in the World Cup 20% worth off to private investors has sparked a global revolt. The world has finally seen him for what he truly is: a grifter, a man disinterested in preserving the sanctity of the sport, a man who is exploiting his power to solely enhance himself and his fellow ultra-rich friends. I mean, FIFA have a track record of being incredibly corrupt. Infantino, however, has made Sepp Blatter look like a saint in hindsight, which is some achievement, really. He's sucking up to Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman to help secure his country the 2034 World Cup, followed by the transparent sporting interference at the behest of the Trump administration. That was a new low. But this proposal was somehow on another level. The plan would include the World Cup being purchased by Joshua Kushner's investment firm. He happens to be the brother of Trump's son-in-law. What a coincidence. But it gets worse, right? This move would also be financed by JP Morgan, the primary backers of the morally bankrupt European Super League project. In addition to that, Infantino was set to bank millions, potentially hundreds of millions from this deal long term, operating as the FIFA Forward Enterprise Commissioner. The perfect scheme to manufacture a lucrative post-presidency career for himself. This man even had the audacity to hold all 211 FIFA member associations ransom with this proposal, essentially saying, commit to the project to receive your $40 million in funding or you get nothing. Just crazy stuff. Now, UEFA immediately condemned the proposal, saying that Infantino had crossed a line, which was good and all, but I said it the other day, the only way to actually stop him was to boycott future tournaments. Think about it, 6 of the 8 World Cup quarterfinalists in 2026 were UEFA nations. Without them, this whole thing cannot happen. Even if other FIFA members and federations have already sold out, you cannot have a World Cup without Europe. That's preposterous. So knowing that full well, UEFA have thankfully committed to a potential boycott, saying there are moments when institutions are judged not by what they are prepared to accept, but by what they refuse to compromise. This is one of those moments. Some things are simply too important to sell. The FIFA World Cup belongs to football. It always will. And so long as Europe has a voice, it will never be for sale. Man, today I feel European. You simply love to see it. The game is back. So here is how the situation currently looks now. We have 55 member nations associations that have committed to boycotting this proposal, but technically it could still pass, as there's 156 other FIFA member associations too who can still support the proposal. After all, FIFA only needs 106 votes to pass. Thankfully, it appears as though CONCACAF are also not on board, releasing a statement saying they reject FIFA's plan. Now, they didn't mention a potential boycott too, but one can only assume that's a further 41 members that plan to reject and vote against this proposal. So we're at 96 in the no category potentially. It is worth noting that CAF, Africa's Football Federation, released a statement by not committing to an answer. They basically said they'll examine the decision next week. Very cowardly in my opinion, but it does appear as though AFC will reject this too. Their president, Sheikh Salman, called the World Cup plan unacceptable. So I can't envision AFC's 47 members getting on board with this. Although, side note, my country's federation, Football Australia, were unsurprisingly pathetic with their response, not committing to a stance of any regard, just shameless stuff. Still waiting to hear anything from CONMEBOL and OFC as of recording, so there's that. Look, to me, this situation is very similar to the Super League a few years ago. A bunch of ultra-rich and power-mad individuals thought they could permanently alter the sport's greatest show on offer just to make themselves even more filthy rich. But like the ESL, Infantino and his fellow cronies underestimated the subsequent backlash that would result from this. He thought he was invincible, but he has overplayed his hand here, and I think this could mark the beginning of the end for Infantino. I really do. FIFA's reputation was already in the gutter. However, the toxicity that has come from this whole fiasco is disastrous. I don't know if FIFA can be reformed at this point, because it is the most transparently corrupt sporting organization out there. Infantino is definitely the most parasitic leader I've ever seen, although one can only imagine that his successor down the line will be just as dodgy. Separate note, we gotta give a shout out to the journalist Martin Ziegler, who broke the story in the first place. Hey, forget about the Fabrizio bombers. This was some of the finest reporting in football history, holding power to account. Ziegler, you have my respect. Moving to club football news, and it's the end of an era at St. James's Park, with Eddie Howe stepping down as Newcastle manager after 5 largely successful years at the helm. He'll now be replaced by another up-and-coming manager in German Matthias Jaissler. More on his credentials later on, but this is a bit of a bombshell here. I'm not quite sure what to make of it all, if I'm being completely honest, although from the outside looking in, it does appear as though the wheels have well and truly fallen off this Newcastle project in the past year. Remember, when Howe arrived, he was the guy picked to revolutionize the club, fresh off of their £300 million purchase by Saudi Arabia's PIF. And yes, he was given the tools early on with a lot of big signings arriving, but he still had to steer the ship from impending relegation, which he did so brilliantly. A club that had experienced over a decade of straight up misery suddenly had this new lease of life with their exceptional manager performing wonders. The following season, they then reached the Carabao Cup final. Okay, they fell short that year, but 12 months later, they got the better of Liverpool to pick up their first piece of silverware in 70 years. From that moment, legendary status was essentially achieved. Howe went on to also secure a UCL football that same season. The project couldn't have been going any better, right? Relegation battlers to a Champions League side in the space of 4 years. With a top manager and world-class talent at their disposal, the Geordies were in dreamland. The sleeping giant had well and truly been awakened. But the summer of 2025 would prove to be a very painful one for any Newcastle fans, as they were essentially humbled by England's food chain. Despite their ultra-rich owner's status, Newcastle couldn't spend as freely as the traditional Big Six due to FFP and then Premier League's PSR rules, which is why they often then missed out on targets like Ekitike, like Seshko, like Mbeumo, amongst many others. Adding to their misery, the Isak saga then took center stage. He'd go on to depart the club on deadline day for Liverpool, and despite the club then replacing with £277 million worth of recruits, the overwhelming majority were not a hit. Newcastle's subsequent 25-26 season was a disaster. Yes, they reached the UCL knockout stages, but were then obliterated by Barca, and in the league, they plummeted down to 12th place, with Howe's tactics starting to come into question, which would have sounded absurd 12 months prior. The guy could simply do no wrong back then, but suddenly was facing heavy and legitimate criticism. Now, he chose to remain at the club at the season's end, but the off-season has only seen more misfortune. Anthony Gordon departed to Barcelona, followed by Sandro Tonali to Spurs. Considering Spurs finished 17th last year, the optics of the Italian leaving Newcastle for them was just a bad look. Bruno Guimaraes is also now expected to depart shortly for Arsenal. The star-studded spine has more or less disappeared in the space of 12 months, but it gets worse, because like in 2025, where they kept missing out on transfer targets left, right, and center, 2026 has been a carbon copy scenario. Their Gordon replacement, Munoz, was on his way to Newcastle until Liverpool hijacked their key target once again. Then Villa did the same thing with Johan Manzambi. Leeds also snapped up their long-term keeper target in Trafford as well. Granted, Newcastle have since signed a further 4 players this window in Bazumana Toure, Alaji Bamba, Sean Stur, and Iwan Jawoun for £111 million. But these guys are all young, unproven U21 players that aren't expected to adequately replace their previous stars straight away. It's become clear that Newcastle just don't have the allure or financial power within the confines of the current rulebook to bring in elite elite players, so the morale within hasn't been great for some time. Eddie Howe, meanwhile, has struggled both on and off the pitch. He actually suffered pneumonia last year, and according to Sky Sports, Howe had been looking for an exit for some time now, which is probably the reason why the club has a replacement lined up so quickly. It seemed like they were working in the background to find a managerial solution before the news even broke, and they've since done so in German manager Matthias Jaissel, a manager who is definitely worthy of a Premier League club backing him. His CV is decent, winning the Austrian Bundesliga twice, whilst also taking Salzburg to the UCL knockout stages. He then landed the Al Ahly job where he won back-to-back Asian Champions League titles. So an impressive CV in terms of trophies accumulated. Obviously, those credentials don't translate to Premier League success. He's still relatively unproven in terms of his worth at the elite level. That being said, his tactical profile is quite similar to Howe's in many ways, with an emphasis on aggressive pressing, a disciple of Ralf Rangnick and the Red Bull model. He's very much of that school of thought. So interesting times ahead for Newcastle. I don't have high expectations this season, if I'm being honest, especially if they do go on to lose Guimaraes as well. But regardless, Howe has still, in my opinion, done a tremendous job over the 5 years. I think his managerial pedigree is so underrated, taking Bournemouth from the 4th tier to the Premier League and then going to Newcastle and winning their first trophy in 70 years, from relegation to the UCL. Like, all those achievements are very impressive. He is amongst the very best managers England has to offer and has a great future in the game, no doubt about it. Staying in the Premier League, and Fulham have just raided Real Madrid in a €50 million swoop for striker Gonzalo Garcia and midfielder Cesar Palacios. New head coach Alvaro Arbeloa, who of course was Madrid's previous manager, was clearly heavily involved in both of these deals, having worked with both players at the senior level and within La Fabrica's academy previously. The deal for Palacios is 10 mil, whilst the Garcia deal is reportedly 40 mil, an equal club record fee for the Spaniard. A real statement of intent signing from Fulham. Sure, Garcia wasn't the first name on the team sheet at Madrid last year, but he was the Club World Cup's Golden Boot winner back in 2025. He appears to have a lot of potential, having also bagged a hat-trick in La Liga last campaign. It's just been a difficult environment for him to really break out at Madrid, sat behind Mbappe in the striker pecking order. So no shame for him to want to test himself elsewhere in Europe's most competitive division and work under his former boss too. Meanwhile, Palacios is a little further behind in his senior development, having only made 7 senior appearances in his career, but similar to Garcia, he had to compete amongst the likes of Bellingham and Goulet for that attacking midfielder role. So I'm curious to see how they'll adapt to the English game. Madrid have retained a 30% future sale clause, plus they've also ensured the opportunity to match the highest bid in a future transfer, which I think is a highly sensible move from Madrid. These two players have a very high ceiling after all, but are both struggling to develop in such a stacked Madrid environment. Will these two be able to fill the creative and goal-scoring void of Wilson and Jimenez at Fulham? That's the question, although I think Fulham fans will be buzzing with these kind of signings. Staying on the topic of Real Madrid forwards, and Los Blancos have already lined up their Garcia replacement, bringing in 21-year-old centre forward Carlos Espy in a €25 million move from Levante. The Spanish Giants have been very busy this window, having already signed Konate, Dumfries, Silva, all on free transfers, plus Cucurella from Chelsea. They're going all out for Diamande. Meanwhile, Rodri's another key target, but there was always an expectation that they'd be adding another centre forward to their ranks this summer, which is fairly interesting considering obviously Mbappe is the main man up top, but also Endrick is set to return as well. So it'll be fascinating to see how this striker dynamic will work. How does Mourinho keep his alternative options satisfied? But in regards to Espy specifically, I think his profile is going to give Madrid another attacking dimension. At 6'4", he is a physical specimen. He's very strong in the air too, and his development has been really impressive at Levante. In his breakout season in the second tier, he bagged 8 goals. The following campaign in La Liga, he hit double digits. Despite injury setbacks and not actually scoring till January this year, he still managed to outscore Julian Alvarez in the end, bagging 10 goals in his final 13 league games to help ensure Levante's top flight survival. We know Mourinho Mourinho loves a target man, so I think he'll get his fair share of minutes over the course of next season, and he could prove to be a valuable acquisition long term. And now to close out today's ep, we head back to England, back to London, as Chelsea have officially signed Maxence Lacroix from Crystal Palace in a £52 million transfer. Can you believe it? It's the first transfer fee for a player 26 or older since 2022. Granted, the Unk duo of Welbeck and Henderson are set to arrive shortly too, but this is still a much needed signing at the back for Chelsea, which may sound crazy considering the Blues currently have 10 centre-backs amongst their ranks, but many of these guys are expected to depart the club shortly. The likes of Chalobah, Disasi, Badiashile, wouldn't be surprised to see Anselmino or Sarr go on loan. I watched Chelsea live the other day, and I gotta say, I was very unconvinced with what I saw defensively. Tosin Adarabioyo was so poor. Surely he's not going to stick around another season. To be honest, bar Colwill, I haven't been convinced with the centre-back options. Maybe Achiampong will step up this campaign, but nonetheless, I think Lacroix provides valuable experience and quality at the back. He was part of Palace's leadership team. He's an international with France and is competent in both a back four or back three. I didn't have the privilege of watching him week in, week out at Palace, but he's definitely earned a reputation as being one of the division's more reliable central defender options. If I'm being critical, I thought he was a bit questionable at the World Cup in terms of his on-the-ball ability. He looked a bit shaky passing out the back for France, which may not necessarily translate well to an Alonso team that plays a possession-based brand of football. Additionally, what does this mean for Achiampong? I'm really hoping to see more of him this season, but it's going to be tough for him to establish himself further in that back line. But I guess this is a good problem for Alonso to have lots of options at the back. I'm sure we'll get a better understanding of what this Chelsea team will look like defensively in the coming weeks ahead. Anyways, guys, that's all for today's DMAC Daily. Appreciate you tuning in as always, and I'll see you next time.